Ibu yang kami hormati, acara akan kami mulai. Honorable Dean of Faculty of Humanities, Udayana University, Ibu Dr. Padesri Satyawati, SSM Hum, the Honorable Professor Dr. Nyoman Dharma Putra MLit as Coordinator of the Doctoral Study Program in Cultural Studies, Udayana University, Honorable Professor and Lecturers in the Faculty of Humanities, Udayana University, Honorable speakers this evening, Professor Michael Hitchcock from Goldsmith University of London, distinguished moderator, alumni, and all participants. Om Swastiastu. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera, shalom, namo buddhaya, salam kebajikan, and good evening in Indonesia, good morning in London. It's a great pleasure for me to welcome every one of you to the guest lecture session 2 with the topic Gastronomy, Cultural Industry, and Cultural Diplomacy, a Southeast Asian Perspective, Tuesday, March 22, 2022. Ladies and gentlemen, the first agenda, National Anthem, Indonesia Raya. Ladies and gentlemen, let us pray together before we continuing the session. Pray based on individual belief. Pray begins. Pray finish. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, we would like to begin the guest lecture with warm welcome remarks that will be conveyed by coordinator of the Doctoral Study Program in Cultural Studies Udayana University. Please welcome Bapak Profesor Dr. Nyoman Dharma Putra MLit. Bapak, time is yours.
Well, thank you, Renata. Let me start by expressing Om Swastiastu. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera untuk kita semua. Salam. First of all, I would like to express my warm greeting to Professor Michael Hitchcock, who is now in London. Thank you very much for your time and your kindness to share your knowledge and expertise to us this evening. I know that you are very busy during the semester time, but I really appreciate your time to talk to us this evening. Our Excellency, the Dean of Faculty of Humanities, Dr. Sri Satyawati, thank you, and we would like you to formally open this public lecture later on. But first of all, I also like to say a little bit about our relationship with Michael Hitchcock. Michael is long friends of two late professors at Udayana University. The first one was Professor Igustin Wurabagus, the person, our mentor, who established the master and doctorate program of the cultural studies. So when Michael Hitchcock came to Indonesia as student to do his field work as an anthropology student, he got academic sponsorship from Professor Igustin Wurabagus. If I'm not mistaken, Michael Hitchcock did his field work in Bima, in Sumbawa, back in, I don't know, I can't remember, probably late 80 or early 90, quite a long time ago. Probably some of us wasn't born yet at that time. The other professor was Professor Adnyana Manobo, where Michael's and his team in London Metropolitan University back in mid-1990 got a big project from European Union to work together with Professor Adnyana Manobo. So Professor Michael Hitchcock has a very close connection to our university. So thank you for all the productive connection in the last probably 2 decades or so. And tonight, Professor Michael Hitchcock will talk to us about gastronomy from two perspectives. First, gastronomy from as a cultural industry. The other one as a cultural diplomacy. I wouldn't go into much detail because I don't know much about it. It is Michael's expertise. I'm sure that the public lecture by Michael Hitchcock will be very interesting and meaningful for us, our student at doctoral program of cultural studies, alumni, our staff, and also our colleges from all over Indonesia. Mike, we also have our friend from West Sumatra, from Lombok, from Java, of course, and from elsewhere. So we have quite good and variety of crowd, which is encourage us to keep to do the good things. Thank you very much. And now it's may I ask the Dean of Faculty of Humanities, Dr. Madesri Satyawati, to open this public lecture. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bapak, for very welcome for this evening. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, may I kindly to invite Dean of Faculty of Humanities, Udayana University, to convey the opening remarks and officially open the guest lecture event. Please welcome Ibu Dr. Madesri Satyawati, SSM Umum. Ibu, time is yours.
Terima kasih Ibu Renata, terima kasih. Om Swastiastu. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Namo Buddhaya. Shalom, salam sejahtera untuk kita semua. Good afternoon and welcome to Faculty of Humanities, Udayana University, for our distinguished guest, Professor Michel Hitchcock. Good afternoon and good morning. Good afternoon and thank you for coming to coordinator of the doctoral study program in culture studies, all professors and lecturers, all students, and all invitees, ladies and gentlemen. Hopefully you all are fine in this afternoon. First of all, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to the Almighty God, Ida Sang Hyang Widiwasa, for his blessing. We could have an opportunity to attend the guest lecture on gastronomy, culture, industry, and culture diplomacy, as well as ASEAN perspective today on March 2022. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Faculty of Humanities in this occasion, I would like to thank Prof. Michel Hitchcock for being willing to be the speaker on the guest lecture carried out today in our university, especially at Faculty of Humanities in your busy time, of course, and schedule as a lecturer in your university. Thank you very much. As we know, Prof. Michelle has come to Indonesia many times. I heard from Prof. Dharma Putra, and even he has done a research related to anthropological topic in Indonesia, particularly in Bima. Yeah. And I'm sure he must be quite good in Indonesian language, of course. Yeah, I think so. I believe that what will be presented by Prof. Michelle Hitchcock will be very important and useful for our students and lecturers. The topic could give as a new knowledge so that it may be used and as a topic in completing the final project for thesis or for dissertation for my student, of course. In this chance, as the Dean of Faculty of Humanities, I also would like to apologize for our inconvenient services given to Prof and all participants. And I do hope you all will enjoy the guest lecture today and use the moment very well to improve for our academic insight. And now, mohon izin saya akan membuka. And now by saying Om Awignam Astu Namo Sidam, I declare that the guest lecture on gastronomy, cultural industry, and culture diplomacy, a Southeast Asia perspective is officially open. Thank you. Om Santi 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 Om. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Shalom. Namo Buddhaya, salam sejahtera untuk kita semua. Terima kasih banyak, Prof. Michelle Hitchcock. Terima kasih. Ya, terima kasih untuk semua juga.
Terima kasih untuk semua, Ibu. Saya datang di kampus UNUD lebih daripada 40 tahun yang lalu.
Oh iya.
Sudah lama sekali. And I'll tell you a little story. When I set off from England, Mark Hobart, I told Mark Hobart that I was being sponsored by Pak Bagus. And then I said, how do I get in contact with him? And he said, you go to his house and you find a big gate and there's a chain on the gate. And then you rattle the chain really hard until he appears, okay? So I came all the way across Indonesia, came to Pak Bagus's house, found the chain, and he appeared like magic. Anyway.
Yeah, thank you. Saya dan Anda punya lokasi riset yang sama, the same research location in Bima. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, it's a great pleasure to be here. As I said earlier, it's more than 40 years of a relationship that I have had with UNUD. It feels like a second home to me. I'm going to talk about a topic that we've been exploring at Goldsmiths, and so I prepared it in a more Southeast Asian context. I tried an earlier version of this talk at ITB in Bandung about 3-4 years ago, but this is a different version. So I'm going to talk mainly about gastronomy as a cultural industry and then finish with some remarks on cultural diplomacy and the role of gastronomy in that. So let me first point out gastronomy as a creative industry. Gastronomy, along with, yes?
Please kindly, I will to introduce the moderator for this evening to lead the session of the sharing session. May I?
Yes, go on.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, I do apologize. Okay, for the sharing sessions, we're going to the main agenda with the topic gastronomy, cultural industry, and cultural diplomacy, a Southeast Asian perspective. And for the moderator, this session is Ibu Nuning Indah Pratiwi, SOSM Ecom. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Ibu Nuning Indah Pratiwi. Ibu Nuning, time is yours to lead this session.
Thank you so much, Ibu Renata. It's very good to be here. And good evening, ladies and gentlemen, the Excellencies, Dean of Faculty of Humanities, Udayana University, Coordinator of Doctoral Culture Studies Udayana University, Professor Michael Hitchcock. Thank you so much for having me here. And of course, welcome to Indonesia Virtual Tourism here. And then, of course, tonight, before we are going to hear the elaboration and presentation from Professor Hitchcock, and usually we can call you Mike.
Yeah,
yeah. Okay, thank you so much. Yeah. And of course, I would like to say thank you so much to all of you here, all the participants, to having me here as moderator to conduct our discussion for tonight, Indonesian time, and at morning in UK's time. And of course, with the great topic and of course with the great speaker, our topic is gastronomy, culture industry, and cultural diplomacy, a Southeast Asian perspective. And I would like to introduce our speaker for tonight. So please, to operator, could you share screen of? Yes. Professor Michael Hitchcock, Professor in Cultural Policy and Tourism at Goldsmith, University of London. He conducts practice-based work on cultural tourism and cultural heritage management, especially with regard to Asia. He took his doctorate at the Pitt Rivers Museum at the University of Oxford in 1983, based on his research and a practice-based project in Eastern Indonesia. He did so good. And he also worked as a research assistant at the museum before going to conduct his field work. And also we can see his books. Yes, a lot of books. Heritage tourism in Southeast Asia, and then Indonesian textiles, and then Bali, the Imaginary Museum, and tourism development and terrorism. Wow, the collaboration with Professor Dharma Putra. Yeah. So to all the participants, yeah, you can deliver your question at the end of our presentation. I will open the discussion session, or you can write your question on chat box, and then I will read it, or you can directly deliver your question in the discussion time when I open for the discussion time. So now we will hear the elaboration from Professor Michael Hitchcock. Floor is yours.
Terima kasih, Ibu Nuni. Very pleased to be here and delighted to be invited. As I was saying earlier, I'm an old friend of UNUD, but also other Indonesian universities as well. I'm going to talk about gastronomy from a perspective not usually discussed very much, but it's something that we're very interested in at Goldsmiths. And so I'm going to start off with how the creative industries were defined in Britain. Well, that's the title. And you can see I'm at Goldsmiths, which is part of the University of London, not so far from SOAS, where, of course, there are some very well-known experts on barley. Now, basically, gastronomy, along with tourism, comprises the largest industry in the world, as it involves the creation and exploitation of knowledge in the context of the economy. It may be defined as a creative industry. The term gastronomy is used as opposed to other potential terms, foodways, cuisine, culinary, as it is of the way in which these creative activities are recognized by international bodies such as UNESCO in awarding intangible World Heritage status, as well as UNWTO in preparing tourism master plans. That's why I'm using the term gastronomy. We have other terms, but gastronomy is the one that's used officially. And since I do work every now and again for UNWTO, I'm really following their practice. Now, the interesting thing about gastronomy as a creative industry in the UK is that it was missed out. The UK is a global leader in the creative industry, but when the creative industries were defined, gastronomy was left off. Now, at the time, nobody thought anything of it. It was obvious that design and writing, theatre, all of these subjects were creative industries, but why not gastronomy? In fact, gastronomy is an old established subject as a technical and artisanal field. Switzerland was one of the first to create programs in this area, 1983 in Lausanne. And then later we have the Culinary Institute of America and Cornell, and we have Australia's Adelaide's Le Cordon Bleu. So why not include gastronomy as a creative industry? Well, actually at Goldsmiths, we realized this was an oversight. And I had joined Goldsmiths from a period when I was a dean or decan in Macau University of Science and Technology. And in Macau, I got to associate with anthropologists writing on food, notably Sidney Chung, and he held a conference in Hong Kong, which I went to, and I met lots of historians, anthropologists, and all kinds of specialists working on gastronomy. And I thought, this is very interesting. And then I also, when I came back to the UK, I realized that SOAS had developed an MA in the anthropology of food. And there's quite a big circle in London devoted to that subject. So there's a lot of us in London have become interested. Just a little fact about London. Most people, when they think of gastronomy, they think of Paris, or perhaps the Italian cities, Rome, Napoli. But actually, London is a major gastronomic center, and also it's a very multicultural gastronomic center, much more so than Paris or the Italian cities. So we have a big interest in different kinds of food. So you have to, when I'm talking about this, remember I'm coming at it very much from a London perspective, that we're open to all kinds of things. We're also very interested in cultural diplomacy. Cultural diplomacy is necessary for the UK because we are not a world power, but we have a lot of influence, and that influence comes through what you might call the creative side of things for which we're known. Creative gastronomy is usually associated with fine dining or the luxury end of the culinary market. But this needs to be qualified, as some creative cuisines have emerged from humble origins. For example, Italian cuisine takes its inspiration from cucina povera, the no-waste poor cooking traditions of rural Italy. Cucina povera means literally the poor kitchen. And it's very interesting that Italian food, the kitchen of the poor cooking, is the Italian food that has gone worldwide. So if you're there in Indonesia eating a pizza, just think, cucina povera, this is the poor food of Italy, which has now become a creative cuisine which is known all around the world. In fact, if you go to Sanur, there's actually a couple of really good Italian restaurants there, and I think there are some in Ke-2 as well. So, you know, the Italians get all over the place. Many of the creative products and dishes that we enjoy today worldwide were invented out of necessity by rural farmers over many generations, who worked with the most simple of ingredients to hand. So although we're talking about luxury dining, it has its origins in ordinary cooking. We all live in a world where luxury is something that is offered widely, whether it is a comfortable long-haul flight experience, an exclusive suite in a hotel, or an item of fashion. Luxury is a pervasive given in the cultural and economic life of the West and is rapidly becoming a must-have in the dynamic economies of Asia. Incidentally, one of my most favorite films is Crazy Rich Asians. It really makes me laugh. And I think it's an inspired piece of filmmaking, very, very funny. Gastronomy is often not included in official lists of what comprises the creative industries, but it certainly should be. Luxury is not new. And the contemporary obsession with luxury brands and services is just one variant of a much older aspect of the human experience. In the European Middle Ages, 500 years ago, and the Renaissance, luxury was central to notions of power, courtly splendor, and magnificence, and many portraits survive of rulers and nobles, and later merchants, bedecked in their finery. This is one of our most famous queens. Many other Western countries joke when they talk about England and Britain that we're very unusual. We've had lots of queens. Most people just have kings, but oh no, we have to be different. We have queens, and this is a very formidable queen, Queen Elizabeth I. And this painting is very, very famous. And you can see that she is dressed to impress. And there are lots of paintings of her dressed like this. She was a very tall woman. She was highly intelligent. She spoke, I think, something like 6 languages. And she is most famous for a victory which changed the course of history. You can see the pictures behind her show Spanish ships, and they're coming to attack England. But then a storm breaks out and the ships are driven away. And this moment marks the moment when England starts to become a world power. So this portrait there is telling you something very important, but also look at all the finery around her. She looks absolutely magnificent. And incidentally, the recipes from that period have survived. We also know that people ate wonderful food at that time. And of course, one of the great things that was coming was foodstuffs from Indonesia. Yes, we had peppers, we had cloves, all kinds of things, spices coming from the Spice Islands, and they were coming to Europe. And this found its way into the cooking of all the royal courts of Europe. Now, I'll just give you an example of why luxury is so important. One of the most famous, some would say the most famous painting in the world is Mona Lisa. But look, she's dressed very plainly. And that's what makes the painting very important, because it was very unusual to have a painting with someone dressed in ordinary clothes. And also what was really unusual, you can see that she has got a little bit of a smile. Most people didn't smile. The portraits were power portraits. And this portrait is designed to charm. Of course, one of the great kings central to the history of gastronomy is the so-called Sun King in France, the Roi du Soleil. He lived in Versailles, where they had daily rituals. And Louis XIV caused awe and excitement amongst the aristocracy. And this provided work for highly skilled artisans as aristocrats tried to emulate the magnificence of their ruler. But also we start seeing people eating well on fine plates and tables. In the 18th century, what shaped people's desires had become very important, and luxury consumables started to appear. Now, Chinese porcelain was very expensive. And so in Britain, they experimented to see if they could imitate Chinese porcelain, and which they did. And here you can see a famous dish called willow pattern. It's not Chinese, it's actually made in England at the Wedgwood factories. So if you're going to eat fine food, you need fine things to eat from. Now, court arts are not, and luxury are not just a restriction to the courts of Europe, they're everywhere. This is an illustration from Raffles's History of Java. And you can see here, this is a Javanese highborn man. And you can look at the fine clothes he's wearing and the kris that he's wearing as well. It conveys his magnificence. And of course, in Europe, they had sumptuary laws which actually regulated what clothes people at a different station could wear. But this happened in Southeast Asia too. In Java, for example, it was important that certain batik patterns were not made publicly available. And you can see this is the Sultan of Yogyakarta, and he's wearing a design called Parang Rusak. Parang Rusak was not open to the common people. It was very, very restricted, a very magical, a very powerful pattern. Again, we have, of course, courts in Bali, and you can see here the very fine clothes. And of course, dining rituals would have been very much part of the Balinese courts and their power. Fortunately, we have these wonderful pictures still surviving. And of course, in China, there's a long history of luxury eating. This is a painting showing gentlemen gathered around a table enjoying a banquet. And what's interesting today is that Chinese people still enjoy banquets. I've been to many in China, and you can see that the food is served on a very complex and very beautiful material culture. If you look very carefully at the painting, you can see they're all very fine dining pieces. Of course, what happens in Europe is very interesting because there's an attempt to codify gastronomy. And one of the first is by La Varenne in the 17th century. He introduces a book called Le Cuisinier François, which means French cooking. By doing this, he's basically defining what is a high quality French cuisine. And this book is filled not only with philosophy, it also has recipes, and it became a very much desired publication, read all over Europe. And of course, in doing this, he's also defining what it is to be French. If you don't eat like this, then you're not French. So that France starts to develop a very distinctive cuisine. And very interestingly, it's one of the first European countries that drops using lots of spices because they think that this is not very French. Remember that the spices are coming in via the Dutch and via the Portuguese, and of course the French have to pay for them. So it's a very good way of not paying for them if you don't use them. But interestingly, we continued in England to use spices, still do, and also in Spain, still do, and also in Italy as well, particularly Sicily. So France was very unusual in creating a cuisine which largely excluded a lot of spices. And of course, this meant that French cuisine became the benchmark by which dining as an experience became established. And in fact, in France, it's very interesting that there's a research group at the University of Tours who've pointed out that in France, it's not just the eating the food that is important, it's the conversation that goes with the food. And the food that people eat, they remember meals before, and they discuss it very, very intensely. And so I love France, actually. It's really fascinating to sit and have a meal with French people. These people really, really love their food. And they love to talk about it, and they have memories of food, and they explore and smell and taste everything. And it's very interesting that a lot of the gastronomic terms that have gone global are in fact French. I give you one: terroir. Terroir means, terre means land. Terroir means of the land. That means you can taste in the food the land or the character of the land where the food was prepared. It's particularly true of wine. The French talk about the terroir of the wine and how you can taste the flavor of where it comes from. Most famously, champagne. Champagne has this flinty taste, which comes from the chalk soils of Champagne, where it is made. And it's perhaps no surprise at all that France is a major tourism center. It's usually in the top 2 or 3 centers in terms of tourism destinations, and is famous throughout the world. And of course, gastronomy plays an enormous part. And of course, the French gastronomic guides, but notably Michelin, have gone worldwide. You can find Michelin guides all over the place. And if you're interested why Michelin, a tire company, should have become interested in cooking, well, they were very keen on getting people to drive in their cars so they could sell more tires. I kid you not, that was the reason. And so they created a restaurant guide to encourage people to drive around to restaurants and thereby buy more of Michelin's tires. Today, of course, they're best known for their gastronomic guide. Now, one of the best known Southeast Asian foods globally is Thai. It's become a global phenomenon, and in fact, I can hardly think of a town in England that doesn't have a Thai restaurant. They're everywhere. And I won't go into the reasons for this, but they are complex. They're partly to do with the fact that during the Vietnam War, or as the Vietnamese call the American War, large numbers of American soldiers took their holidays in Thailand and developed a taste for Thai food, but also the growth of tourism in Thailand with the decline of the cost of long hair travel. People would taste Thai food on holiday and then would think, well, it'd be quite nice to taste it at home. So entrepreneurial Thais developed a whole system whereby you can now set up a restaurant in somewhere like England or Germany, and you can get all the things you need, all the plates, the decorations, you can get them all very easily. And very quickly you can set up a Thai restaurant. And of course, there are Asian supermarkets all over Britain where you can buy Thai products, very good quality Thai products. So in fact, if you go to dating sites in Britain, it often asks you which is your favorite cuisine, so that you can get a match with whoever you want to have a date with. And very interesting, one of the boxes you can tick is Thai food. It's there. It's usually French and Italian, sometimes Mexican, but nearly always Thai, always Indian, always Chinese. Interestingly, as I will come to later, the tick box for Indonesia has yet to arrive on dating sites in this country where I'm at the moment. Indonesia and Vietnam are also countries that have had their cuisine travel abroad, albeit in a highly modified way, with Indonesia in the Netherlands. In fact, so important is Indonesian or Dutch Indonesian food is because it's been adapted to the Dutch palate, that actually it's part of the Dutch tourism industry. People from England go to Holland, and one of the joys of going to Holland is to eat Indonesian food. And also, it's a trick missed by Indonesia, or used to be missed by Indonesia, which is the role of cuisine or gastronomy in cultural diplomacy, but not anymore. I'm pleased to say that the wonderful embassy of the Republic of Indonesia in London does a lot to promote Indonesia through cultural diplomacy using Indonesian gastronomy. It regularly has events associated with Indonesian gastronomy, and it's something that's really catching on, and it certainly impresses people, and it's gradually finding its way into popular culture in this country, and it leaves a very good image for Indonesia. This is a relatively recent introduction. However, we have to take our hat off and bow to this wonderful lady and friend of mine, Sri Owen of London and Indonesia. She has published many books on Indonesian gastronomy, and I have them. They're extremely readable. They're very interesting, and she's been publishing for many decades. And she is an absolutely charming lady. She's a one-woman a force for gastronomic cultural diplomacy on behalf of Indonesia globally, because she's also had TV series, radio series, and she's now decided to go back to her original love, which is teaching and cookery demonstrations. She's not going to write any more books, she now says. She's always a delight to meet. She's giving talks and lectures, and she is incredibly famous in the UK and in Europe, and through that, with a friendship with Madhur Jaffrey, the Indian food writer. She's also well known in North America. So Indonesia has its star for basically bringing knowledge of Indonesian gastronomy to the world through this incredible person. And you can see some of her books here. They truly are wonderful, and I can tell you the recipes work because I use them myself. They are easy to do, and they're very authentic. And she has also cultural explanations as to why Indonesians in different parts of Indonesia eat in the way they do. They are very well researched books. So we can really thank this lady for, I would say, putting Indonesian gastronomic cultural diplomacy and gastronomy as a creative industry on the map. She's done it. But also, there's things going on in Indonesia too. I'm not sure if many of you know this book, edited by Yop Ave, called Grand Batik Interiors. And Grand Batik Interiors was an inspirational gesture to show how you could create distinctive dining spaces using batik and Indonesian crafts. And you can see this wonderful illustration there. I had the honor of writing the first chapter in this book for the late Yop Ave, former Minister of Culture and Tourism in Indonesia. Sadly, he passed away a few years ago, but he was an incredible, again, another force for cultural diplomacy in Indonesia. In his case, using tourism as a way of spreading knowledge of Indonesian soft power. Now, something here I think which disappeared in Indonesia but was once influential was the rice tafel, or literally the rice table, in which servants in batik served dishes from all across the archipelago with great ceremony. Now, the rice tafel was invented on behalf of the Dutch and was to show how the whole of Indonesia, or the Dutch East Indies, was represented. But when Indonesia gained its independence, the rice tafel fell out of popularity because it was too associated with colonialism and the Dutch regime. But I'm pleased to say that modern creative restaurateurs are realizing the potential of the rice tafel with its tremendous ceremony and its party atmosphere. And so the rice tafel, I would say about 15, 20 years ago, started to reappear. And now it's become well established. And I must say, I'm glad people have forgotten its colonial origins, because actually it's great fun. And when I come to Jakarta, if I have foreigners with me, I take them to a restaurant which does a rice tafel, because it's a very exciting way of eating. Lots of music, lots of color, lots of nice food. And I usually find that all my Western friends are absolutely astonished. They never realized that Indonesia had such a diversity of food. So actually, I think the rice tafel is something that could be revisited much more thoroughly as a way of presenting Indonesia, both for as a creative industry, also for cultural diplomacy, because the rice tafel acts as a showcase for the whole of Indonesia. That's just an opinion. Come back to me if you don't like it. Now, I should warn you that Sri Owen herself is not very keen on the rice tafel, so I need to be careful, because she is a friend of mine and she is such a distinguished person. Also, another thing, of course, is that Indonesia's diversity is so very important. I think this is something that needs to be much more flagged up, because I think it would draw visitors to different parts of the archipelago. I'm not trying to chase away tourists from Bali. Heaven knows I wouldn't want to do that. But I think Indonesia can absorb many more tourists. And I think making people aware of the diversity of the different traditions. Incidentally, nasi padang is a form of eating that has made its way out of Indonesia. You can eat in this style of eating actually in London and also in other Western cities. So nasi padang has also made it out of Indonesia. So as I said, the rice taffel revived. This is happening in Jakarta, but I think maybe it could be put on as a kind of cultural diplomacy when there are events associated with exhibition openings. You may be aware that the British Museum holds a very important collection, which was largely stolen. The Indonesian government knows this, the British Museum knows this, the British government knows this. Well, of course, it's the Raffles collection. We know it was stolen because Raffles wrote about it, and his scribes who were there in Yogyakarta also wrote about it. But the Indonesian government has said, look, what's the point of bringing it back to Indonesia when in fact it serves a very useful purpose in the British Museum, providing the British Museum agrees to hold exhibitions on Indonesia, because the footfall of the British Museum is 7 million a year. Imagine if you have an exhibition on Indonesia and it's seen as it's seen as by 7 million people. That is 7 million, but out of that, a certain percentage of those people will seek to come to Indonesia. And I was thinking, well, next time we have an exhibition on Indonesia, I think we should have food as a central part of that. Also remember that Indonesia has a royal culinary heritage. Yogyakarta is fantastic with all its ceremonies. And of course, I'm not going to say that Bali hasn't got it. Bali's full of wonderful ceremonies, but Yogyakarta is one of those great places, not as well known as Bali to tourists, but it should be. And indeed, when you go to a conference in Jogja, you usually get a parade and then a wonderful banquet of Javanese food. And that's really, again, another distinctive tradition. Even within Java, there are different traditions. The food of Madura, the food of West Java and East Java, they're all different cuisines. And even the cuisine of the area around Jakarta is also different again, because Jakarta also has a partly Melayu or Malay heritage. So it has its own cuisine as well. Also, I think Indonesia should celebrate its Chinese population. Indonesia has the largest overseas Chinese population in the world. It's absolutely enormous. And it has its own culinary traditions, but people in the West and also in China, other source of tourists, they don't realize that. But I think it's great. I think that both the fusion traditions, the Peranakan cooking in Indonesia is very nice. And I also think that associated with the distinctive Indonesian Chinese arts, you can see this is some very distinctive Chinese batik from Cirebon. I think this could easily be flagged up, both in terms of cultural diplomacy. Now, why do I say cultural diplomacy? Well, when I was at the Macau University of Science and Technology, the Chinese students, whenever they thought of Indonesia, they thought of the fact that the Chinese population in Indonesia has sometimes a very difficult time in Indonesia. And I said, look, that's not always the case. I mean, you know, the parts of Indonesia which are very welcoming to the Chinese, and the Chinese can be a very well integrated population, and their food is much loved in Indonesia. And some very famous Indonesian dishes are thought to have Chinese origins, like nasi goreng. If you want to go into this, I've actually written a paper on the history of nasi goreng, and I can quite happily send it over to Umum if I can find it. So I think there's another side here. Is actually the Chinese heritage of Indonesia, and that mixed Peranakan, Nyonya Baba culture can also be flagged up, as it is in fact in Malaysia. And after all, there's some very fine Chinese gastronomic traditions in Indonesia, largely of southern Chinese, Cantonese and Fujianese origin. Now, here's something I want to mention in passing, and it's the fact that in Bali, Bali has given rise to quite a lot of fusion cuisines. There are diverse elements in Bali with Australian, Italian, Japanese, and various Indonesian components. And these are often comprised in many ways, but these fusion cooking is a bit unsung. Nobody really knows about it. And if I mention something like bistik ayam, some people find it amusing because it's presenting Indonesian food rather in the manner of Western cooking. Hence the term bistik, which is taken from beefsteak, where you have the meat has central components surrounded by various vegetables. Now, I don't laugh because actually I think bistik ayam is actually very original. I think it's creative. I think it's a very interesting way of combining or fusing Indonesian and Western traditions. And I think there could be a case for some research in Bali to look at these fusion cuisines and see what could be done about them, or whether tourists like them. I certainly know they're willing to try them. I've watched them, and it's very interesting when they discover them. So here are some points for discussion. Indonesia's cultural industries are an essential part of its diversifying economy. Gastronomy is a key part of this, but perhaps not given the global kudos that it deserves. And that applies as much to the UK as it does to Indonesia. Tourism is a key driver, especially in Bali. Perhaps the more could be done with the experiential side. Italy and Spain, for example, have forged ahead in agro-tourism. I know some of this does exist in Indonesia, but nowhere near as pervasive as in Italy and Spain. Those two countries really have developed it. It's a major, exciting tourism experience. You learn how to grow the food, you learn how it's kept, stored, and then you learn how it's cooked and eaten. And I think Indonesia is going, especially Bali, has got tremendous potential for agro-tourism. And when I know it does exist to a certain extent, but it could be done much more. And finally, how could the university sector, UNUD in particular, but also other Indonesian universities, help with boosting Indonesian gastronomy as a key cultural industry and also as an increasingly important part of Indonesia's soft power or cultural diplomacy? Thank you all very much. Terima kasih.
Thank you so much, Professor Hitchcox, for your presentations, and applause to Professor Hitchcox. Thank you. And now I would like to open for discussion session. But before that, can I deliver my question for you, Professor Hitchcox, because it's very interesting topics, and you know, this is a very new insight for me, because actually my educational background in communication study, but I can get the, I can get the main point between the culture and the food regarding to the gastronomy perspective, because when I hear your presentations, in your opinion, that gastronomy will be happen, and we can make it the gastronomy in culture industry through the food and the culture. But my question is, how come we can combine it, the culture and the foods, in the a gastronomy perspective with the meaning, and then we can deliver to all the, with all the people in the world. So that from that we know that, okay, this is the gastronomy from Thailand. This is from Indonesia, because even somehow, or some people don't know about the food and then the cultures of other country. So, but in your opinion, we can combine it all.
Yes.
So, yes.
In fact, your background is very
Yes.
important. Your background is very important because you said you come
Yeah.
from a communications background. One of the reasons why Italy does so well in presenting its gastronomy is that there are vast numbers of programs on Italian food. They and they go all around the world. So when people come to Italy as tourists, they already know a lot about Italian cooking, and they can understand the menu, and they can also understand the cultural meaning of the menu. So even before they get on holiday to Italy, they already know a lot. I think there's a big case for Indonesia supporting its gastronomy with documentaries, with online coverage, influencers, just like anything else. Influencers are terribly important because I think a lot of potential visitors to Indonesia do not understand the cultural significance. Indonesians do because they're living it. And so they don't feel the need to communicate it because they know it, okay? But you need to remember that the foreigner doesn't know, okay? I know, but I'm unusual. I think it's very important. And I also think that in training in Indonesia for gastronomy, interpretation needs to be taught. In Switzerland, in hotel schools, they teach not only the culinary traditions, they teach interpretation, how to present it, what does it mean, where does it come from? And again, Switzerland has all of its backup with books, TV programs and everything. So I think there's a case for the communication side and also the education side. Now, I've been to a lot of hotel schools in Bali, and you know what? They largely teach Western traditions, and they don't teach the students how to communicate about Indonesian traditions. So the students don't think it's necessary to tell visitors, well, actually, when you go to an Italian restaurant, the Italians will tell you what it is you're eating and why, and why it's important, and they're very excited about it. And I think we need that excitement in Indonesia, because Indonesians do know. Indonesian cuisine is very sophisticated and has great meaning. And I think there also ought to be more creativity in the presentation of food in Indonesia, so it becomes an art form. So I think the designers and artists should think about new ways of presenting Indonesian food. That book by Joop Ave, I think, was a very good start. I think it showed you what you could do with traditional crafts to create an Indonesian atmosphere. The reason why Thais are so successful in the UK is because they can create the whole experience of Thailand in London. When you walk into the restaurant, you're walking into Thailand like this. And they have all the necessary equipment and arts. So I think there's a case for UNUD to think in a cross-disciplinary way about these questions. I think it's partly media and communications. It's the creative industries. It's the art department. It's also science as well. I think at the moment there's a very rising Thai academic who did her PhD with me on Thai food, and particularly for the young. What young people were eating, and she's gone back to Thailand. She's not only an academic star, but she's also a TV star. She's my young student, Everybody knows her in Thailand because she's saying, look, it's okay, it's important for tourism, it's important for cultural diplomacy, but it's also important for our health. Understanding Thai food as a health product is absolutely essential. I hope that was not too long an answer because your question was really, really very interesting.
Thank you so much. Because we can combine it with communication and culture studies, right? Okay, thank you so much, Professor Hitchcock. Now I'm going to all the participants here. To all the participants, you can raise a hand button or directly to deliver your questions. Yes, please. Or maybe I can pick in here on the chat box.
Yeah, I'm also looking at the
Yes.
chat as well.
Bapak
okay,
John Kresna, do you want to deliver your question directly? So maybe you can open your microphone, please. Bapak John Kresna, are you here? Bapak John Kresna? Okay. Okay, I'm going to the next question from Ibu Utami. Ibu Utami, could you please to deliver your question directly, and then you can open your microphone, mention your name and where you're from. Yes, Ibu Utami, floor is yours. Yes. Yeah. Could you open your microphone because you're still mute? Yes, Ibu.
Yeah, good evening, Ibu Nuning Indah Pratiwi. Om Swastiastu. What? I'm so pardon please, because I have a living this in Manapi. Yeah.
Sorry, because I saw you raise a hand. Sorry. Okay, next. Thank you, Ibu Utami. And then next, who else? To all the participants? Prasiwi Bestari. Yes. Prasiwi Bestari.
Hello, can you hear my voice?
Yes.
Yes.
We can hear you.
Sorry, I cannot turn on my video due to bad internet connection. But thank you, Dr. Michael Hitchcock, for a great presentation. I have a question. As you mentioned earlier that our food doesn't get much kudos from the international society. So what do you think is the main challenges, especially in getting Balinese food a recognition within the international society, like for example, Thai food or Italian food, you name it. And what do you think that could be done to further promote Balinese gastronomy? Now we already have a lot of cooking class probably in Ubud and such as food festival, but is there any other thing that could be done to boost its position within the international society? Thank you. I hope it's clear enough.
Yeah, you know, it's clear. And I can also read your question in the chat. So I've been thinking about it for some time. I think, as I mentioned earlier, I think the media and communications is very important. I think that what Bali should do would be to invite some top food presenters to Bali to make a program or make a series on Bali. Rick Stein, for example, is a British restaurateur specializing in seafood and fish, and he's been all over the world. Now, I don't think he's been to Bali. Now, Bali has a tremendous seafood and fish tradition, which really is very high quality. Every time I go to Ubud, I go with Professor Wayan Ardika to a fish restaurant not far from Ubud, and I'm always impressed by the quality of cooking. So I think it's important to get some big names to come to Indonesia, but also Indonesia needs to nurture its own influences, and also there needs to be more of a publishing effort. I mentioned Sri Owen, but we need lots of Sri Owens. But Sri Owen has stopped writing. She's now a very old lady, doesn't want to write anymore. And so I think it's very important to get writers in this. And I also think, you know, I think starting to think about restaurants as creative spaces. You know, I mean, this happens very well in Bali. You can go to many restaurants where you have dance shows and art shows. I know some hotels which have art galleries in them, but I think there needs to be more of this, and it could certainly boost Bali and Indonesia's standing in the world. I also think more research on Balinese food in the manner I mentioned with this Thai student of mine. I think we need some more PhDs written by Balinese on the history and culture of food, Bali, on food as a creative tradition in Bali, and then food as a health tradition in Bali, you know. One of the things people are aware around the world about Chinese food is there's a health side to Chinese food, but they're not aware that there's a health side to Indonesian food. I mean, you know, one of the great things about Indonesia is it has not lost its traditional medicine. I mean, you can still get jamu. And I think there's potential for research in this, and research that could ultimately help to inform how things could be delivered in the policy area and ultimately in practice. So yes, there are lots of cooking schools in Ubud, but it needs to go much further than this. It's not just teaching people how to cook. It's teaching how the whole system. Now, the great thing is that one thing that is becoming known, and in fact, it was on TV actually recently, is the rice terrace cultivation system, the subak in Bali. Now, I think the subak is absolutely fascinating, and I think this could be really well interpreted to tourists, because the story of food begins with the Balinese subak and the management of water. This is a fascinating topic, and it's something that lends itself visually. And I think a great program, a television program on this system of cultivation could really go global and raise the status of Balinese cuisine. If you think about Thailand, there's lots and lots and lots of cookery programs made on Thailand, both by Thais and also by international cookery stars, but not so much in Indonesia. And I think that's something that could be done to do that. I hope that gives an answer to your question, because I think it is a very important question. And I thank you very much for it.
Okay, thank you, Professor Hitchcock. So we're going to the next question from Anak Agung Dalam. Adakah Bapak Anak Agung Dalam? Yes, Bapak Anak Agung Dalam. Yeah, please.
Yes.
Give your question.
Yes.
Yeah, directly.
I'm here.
Yeah.
Yeah, I read your question in the chat. Do you want me to just answer it?
Yes. Do you want to deliver your question directly, or I can read your question on the chat box?
Okay, I try.
Yes.
Prof. Hitchcock, kindly allow me to ask your opinion. Here in Indonesia, at almost every crossroad in the large cities and even in small town, one encounter a Padang restaurant, but the cuisine is not too special. What causes those restaurants to exist, Prof?
Okay, I thank you. That is a really good question, and I do know the answer to that question. The reason why you get Padang restaurants is because the people who create them are among Indonesia's greatest entrepreneurs. Now, the people of Sumatra, the Minangkabau people, for example, have a great tradition of migration, merantau. And that merantau or migration is all around the world.
Around the world, yes.
Yes. And the reason they're able to do it is because they have the distribution system. They have the financial knowledge and they have the expertise, but most in particular, they have the desire. They are incredibly ambitious people. And also they're very clever because the food is a broadly acceptable food, slightly on the fast food side. And so it's not special necessarily. There is special Padang food, but you find that in Sumatra. But what you find at every crossroads is this fast food, which everybody is familiar with. So it's not just in Indonesia, it goes through across into Malaysia, into Singapore, and also into the UK. Yeah. So that's the reason. Organization, migration, and entrepreneurship, and I would say creativity. They are certainly creative people. I hope that answers your question.
Yes.
Good, thank you.
Yeah. Maybe fast food like McDonald's, Padang restaurant like that. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, it is a bit. It is a bit. Yeah, it is a bit.
Okay.
And you know, it's also McDonald's is also incredibly entrepreneurial, and you could say that McDonald's is in some ways a kind of creative industry. It's not special, but it's universal. And I think Padang food is becoming universal. You find, look, I can go to London. I could go into London and get a Padang meal. You know. And if I ask where they come from, they'd like it because I speak I don't just speak Bahasa Indonesia, I speak Bahasa Melayu, and they like it when I speak Bahasa Melayu with them. So yes, it's a good point. I think one should look. Maybe it's a good topic for I mean, I know the answer to that question, but I don't think it's been done seriously researched, and so it could be a very good dissertation topic actually. The relationship between entrepreneurship, migration, also the family pattern, because it's a matrilineal society. So men are encouraged to travel around the world. So Padang people these people are very well traveled. So thank you very much for that wonderful question.
Thank you, Bapak Ana Agung Dalam, for your question, the good question.
Yes.
And then the next question from Ibu Yuni. Are you here? Could you turn on your microphone? And then,
hello.
Yes, Ibu Yuni, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for the chance, and I will ask a question because, as we know that from this presentation, Professor Mai, he mentioned some of the famous cuisines, just like from France, and then the Western, there's Italian, other countries. And then my question is, what factors affect how famous the certain cuisines are? I mean, is that just only the promotion? I mean, is there any relationship between the history of any culture or any country that where the cuisines come from, or unique culture, or any popularity, or maybe is there any other factors? Thank you.
Yes, because French cuisine became global, not just through promotion. It came because it was backed up by some very serious creativity. I'll tell you the story. It's a partnership between a hotel director called César Ritz and a French chef called Escoffier. Now, Escoffier came to London in the Victorian period, an Edwardian period, and Escoffier opened his restaurant in the best hotel in London. And he made it a very special creative experience because he kept on inventing dishes. He didn't just stay with what he knew. And he kept his British and London-based audience coming back because he created new dishes based on the French cuisine. And so I think there's a case for an Escoffier approach to Bali and Lombok and elsewhere in Indonesia, by looking at, it's not just a question of publicity, it's treating it as a creative product. And that's what Escoffier did. And indeed, Escoffier was so famous that in England today, when we talk about to eat a lot, we say scoff. We scoff. And I'm going to scoff a lot. But that comes from his name, Escoffier. We scoff. And so every kid in the United Kingdom knows the word scoff. And I think we need a whole understanding across society. And I also think that since this is taking place in a university forum, I think research is also very important, not just about the history and culture, but also about the creative side. For example, there is Myrni's Warung in Ubud. Now, she would be worth interviewing because she has experimented with Balinese foods to find out what works, what can be sold. And of course, she has created a fine dining experience by the bridge in Champawat. And then she has her restaurant, and then she has her very wonderful high-class art and craft shop. And people go there in large numbers, and that's a very creative experience, combining arts and crafts with experimentation, and also with her name. So basically, maybe Ibu Murni, if I dare say this, should be made a visiting professor at Ud. Now that'd be something. Make her a visiting professor, not a full professor, but a visiting professor. Say, look, you've been a very famous person in the development of Balinese food. Let's take it one stage further and get her advice for researchers. I hope that was an answer to your question, because it is a very, very important question. And I thank you very much for that, Ibu Yuni.
Thank you very much, Mike. It's a great answer.
Thank you so much, Ibu Yuni. And then I'm going to, wow.
I'm so sorry, the network in my place isn't stable.
Yes, Ibu Yuni, it doesn't matter. We can hear you here. And thank you so much for your question. And now I'm going to, wow, I know her. Yeah, Ibu Dr. Diane Butler. Hello. What's going on, Ibu Doctor? Okay, so could you deliver your question?
Yes. Bagus kalau Nuning yang baca bahasa Inggrisnya. Hello, Prof. Michael.
Hello.
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 Nuning can, yes.
Yeah, I remember you.
We ate together.
Yeah. Where are you?
I still live in Bedulu, which has a lot of very beautiful local cuisine, like Sprobotan.
Yeah.
I was going to ask Nuning to read the question because I thought it's good for her to practice the English, but maybe it's okay. I would try, Nuning. So, you know, Bali is very quiet these days. And of course, people are probably wondering what the future of tourism should look like. And it's a little bit outside of my realm because I never really did very much in the world of tourism in Indonesia, more in the art sense. But maybe about 20 years ago, I invited the now late painter from Ubud, Pak Nyoman Suradnya, who loved to eat. And also his wife was a very good cook. I invited him to come and give a talk at a small event we had about spice and foods and religiosity. And he just enjoyed himself so much talking about the spices that are used and the color of the food, where things are placed, like the desa kalapatra of makanan. Also, what foods are used for which holy days related to the cycle of the season, and what is being honored or given thanks to, how to give thanks through food. And so I wondered, in your opinion, do you think that Bali still has a potential for what Prof. Pitana called enlightenment tourism? And then maybe perhaps something about food and religiosity, Bali Hindu food related in that way, not holistic Western, what's that called? Well-being tourism, but more, yeah, enlightenment tourism. Like hopefully can visit someplace and perhaps be more invited, more enlightened, more invited by God.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. Hey, that's a great question. It's a great topic for discussion. It's a great topic for research as well, because you know, one of the things that visitors from Asia to Europe don't realize is there's actually quite a close connection between religious and philosophical thinking and Western food, particularly in France. The French have really philosophized their food, and it's to do with this mixture that you get in the West of this Greco-Roman, Christian, and Enlightenment mix, and all of that filters through into gastronomy. In fact, next weekend I will be eating Easter eggs because it's Easter. Now, it may interest you to know that it's associated as a Christian custom, but if you look deeply into it, Easter comes from Oster, and it comes from the god, a fertility god, who predates Christianity. So we're calling the Christian festival Easter after a pagan god, which is extraordinary. Now, when you tell people that, and that's so, I get a lot of students from Asia, and they say, "Why do you all eat eggs?" They say, "We can understand the hot cross buns, yeah, because we have a bun with a cross on it." They say, "Yeah, that's to do with Jesus." Okay, we get that. But the eggs. So when I tell them, they are absolutely awestruck, and they say, "You know that?" I say, "Yeah," and you know, it's very important to know that story because it is part of what we eat. And I think in Bali, like you, I have been struck by the delicacy and sophistication of this link between the very, very important beliefs of the Balinese and legends and that, and also with the way tables are arranged, the way that decorations are made. These, I think, are really the future of tourism, because when you go to France, you have lots of different options in cuisine. And if you really want to, you can do the philosophy of French cuisine, you know? If you go to Sicily, you can learn about the religious heritage of Sicily, because Sicily is got a Christian and a Muslim heritage, and that feeds its way into the food. So you become very well aware, and I think this is something that would fascinate tourists in Bali, because tourists want to learn. Tourists, okay, beach holidays are great if you're a family with kids, okay, but if you're not a family with kids, let's say your kids are grown up, you're looking for other things. And I think you may find that there's a very big potential market among the mass tourists from Australia for revisit intentions. The Thais have been very clever at targeting very early tourists to Thailand. The hippies the original hippies, and say, come back to Thailand. You're very welcome, and bring your grandchildren. And the famous Khoi San Road in Thailand is humming with restaurants, and you see these very elderly former hippies, and they're really enjoying it. So I think, you know, the mass tourists from Australia come in such large numbers. I think there's a market for targeting them when they get a bit older to come back to Bali and to get a deeper experience, because actually Australians are aware. This idea that Australians are not aware that Bali has it's strong cultural traditions. Many tourists are aware, they just don't, they're too young to really go and explore it. They're more interested in discos, and so, you know, and having fun. But when they get older, they think, well, you know, been there, done that. And certainly since that wonderful film that called Love, Pray, Eat, I can remember the order it comes in, with Julia Roberts. I mean, maybe one ought to have a Love, Eat, Pray a project in Bali, not associated with Italy or anywhere else, but just in Bali, and say, look, you can love, eat, and pray in Bali. You know, it sounds a bit corny, but hey, it's known. So people are aware through that movie of Balinese spirituality. So why not play on it? So yes, I think you're right. I think enlightenment cuisine, I think, is a very nice topic, and already exists. It already exists in France. It already exists in Italy, and you know, I can't see no reason why it can't exist and become more formalized in Bali. There surely should be a couple of PhDs written on the subject, and turned into publications, publications that are accessible and give people ideas about how they can present it. And also, you need some nice guidebooks at the airports on these kinds of topics. Someone should sit down and write a book, a nice book, accessible book that tells you about enlightenment cooking in Bali. So thank you very much for a very interesting discussion. I enjoyed that very much, and I am absolutely in agreement with you and looking forward to eating with you the next time I come to Bali.
Thank you so much, Ibu Dr. Diane. And the last but not least, yeah, we are going to hear the statement for the great professor from Udayana University, coordinator Cultural Studies doctoral program. And then I would like to invite Professor Dharma Putra. Could you please to give your statement regarding to gastronomy? Yes, Prof. Dharma.
Thank you, Nuning, and also to Professor Michael Hitchcock. It is a very interesting topic. There are a lot of questions, and I really thanks to your kindness to share your expertise on gastronomy. It's a very good and a lot of questions. And I'm sorry, there's not enough time. It's 7:30 p.m. now. We should close the session. On behalf of the University of Udayana, I thank you very much for your kindness to share your knowledge on gastronomy. I think that's all. And now time back to Nuning.
Okay, thank you so much, Professor Dharma Putra. And this is the end of our discussion. So please give it again applause to great speaker for today, Professor Michael Hitchcock. Thank you so much, Professor Hitchcock. Wow, it's very that was very incredible discussion, and of all the participants who having me here. Thank you so much. And now I'm Nuning Indra TV signing out. And we come back again to our great house. Ibu Renata, floor is yours.
Thank you, Ibu Nuni, for lead the sharing session, and thank you to our speaker, Professor Michael Hitchcock, for the insightful discussion. So, ladies and gentlemen, proceed to the next agenda is delivering the e-certificate virtually to our speaker tonight. Kindly, please, committee, share the e-certificate. Yeah. And to all participants, please give a virtual applause for our professor. Thank you so much, Professor, for the information and knowledge which have been given to us. It's usable for us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's a lovely certificate. I would love a copy of that certificate. I will show my colleagues. I'll show my colleagues. I said, they say, where were you on Tuesday? I said, I was in Bali.
Sure, Professor. We will send it later. Ladies and gentlemen, we will have a group photo. Please, to all participants, activate your camera. There is a 4-page, and then I will count one by one to screen capture your picture or group photo. Okay, Bu Ari, could you please helping me to screen capture? Okay, let me count. First page. 1, 2, 3. Give a smile. And second page. 1, 2, 3. Next. 1, 2, 3. And the last page. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, thank you for the smile. Good smile, yeah. Thank you so much, Ibu Ari, for helping me in this session. Gently reminder, please kindly fill out the attendance form that has been informed by official committee through the chat, and please write down your name correctly for the e-certificate to post. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, we come to the end of today's guest lecture. We would like to thank you for spending your time with us today and the active participation. We would like to sincerely thank you to the speaker, moderator, the committee in this guest lecture, and our gratitude also goes to all participants who have participated in the event, either through YouTube, also Zoom meeting for this evening. On behalf of official committee of Udayana University, we would like to apologize for any mistake. Stay healthy and don't forget to hold protocols. Good night and Om Santi. Santi, Santi Om. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Excuse me, Mike. Some of our colleges like to have your PowerPoint presentation. Is it possible?
Yeah.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
That's good.
No problem. I got some slides in the wrong order, but what doesn't matter. The main point, it's there, and you're welcome to it. I mean, I probably will develop another one